Today we're making a 14.5 foot long desk for my bedroom out of Douglas fir and concrete. Let's start with the concrete fabrication. I have some scrap 2x2s and 2x4s and I just glued and screwed them together, and this is going to give me that brutalist detail towards the front of these concrete columns. The walls of the mold are made out of 3/4 inch melamine, and I used 2 layers of 3/4 inch plywood to make the indentation that the desktop will notch into. I'm trying to get rid of scrap, so I just picked the pieces that I had on hand, since I try to minimize using new material for concrete molds. Each one of these concrete columns will weigh almost 400 pounds, so I'm really pushing the limits of pocket holes here, but I've done this quite a few times in the past, and I really trust how strong they are. I sealed the exterior of the mold with silicone, and on the inside, I coated everything with vegetable oil. This is just going to keep the wood from sticking too much to the concrete. I got out the mud mixer, and Jesse and I mixed and poured almost 800 pounds of concrete in just about 15 minutes. These blocks are solid, and this is Quikrete 5000, which is way stronger than typical concrete, so I didn't worry about any rebar. Notice that we filled the concrete all the way to the top and then screeded them to ensure that we had a level finish, or at least we thought we were ensuring it. But as you'll see shortly, something went wrong. The vegetable oil worked quite well, but I noticed at the bottom of the concretes, the part that's going to be sitting on my floors, didn't cure very level, which was weird because I checked the base and the base was level. No big deal though, I just got out my angle grinder and cut down the high sides, and I got them level in just about 8 minutes. I rinsed the dust off, got them nice and clean, and then had to figure out how I was going to move them by myself. I set up some blocks so I could tilt them over, and then I just put them on a heavy-duty gorilla dolly and trucked them right into my bedroom. I was pleased to see that the grinding left them nice and stable, but they were pretty heavy to wrestle into place. These are 4x12 Douglas fir structural beams. I get them from the local building supplier, and I like them for furniture pieces even though it's not that refined of a material. They're just really inexpensive. I need the desk to be about 14.5 feet long, but the beams came as 16 footers, so I clamped the two of them together so I could cut them nice and even. My Ryobi circular saw has a 7.25 inch diameter blade, but that's not quite enough to go all the way through these 3.5 inch thick pieces of wood, so I did have to finish off the cuts with my reciprocating saw. I set the blade to 1.5 inches deep, and now I'm going to cut those notches that are going to go right around that concrete ridge. I clamped the board to use as a guide, and then I just made a whole bunch of repeated cuts so I could take a chisel or a screwdriver or whatever's handy and then chip out all those thin pieces. I cut both of the boards at the same time, but really only the first one needs to be that tight. The second one will be hidden behind it, so I probably should have gone a little bit looser and just made life easier. It's been really hot out in the desert, so we try to do our long stretches of sanding at night when it's considerably cooler. But with Jesse's help, it only took us about 30 to 40 minutes to sand both of these beams, and we just sanded them to 150 grit. Now it's time to check the fit. The first check was making sure it fit between both of the walls of my bedroom. No problem there. So what we did now is we put the beam on a couple of sawhorses so that we could slide the concrete blocks underneath them in the right position. Now, easier said than done, because these weigh almost 400 pounds. Once we got them close, we tried to lower it on, and while I'm impressed with how almostly precise my woodworking was, it just wasn't quite enough for them to fit over. So I need to cut the channel just a little bit wider. So what I'm going to do here is clamp down a speed square and just cut off a little bit more than 1/16 of an inch using the circular saw. Now you really want to make sure the speed square is locked in solid, because you want this cut to be nice and parallel. I was anticipating the beam not fitting on the first try, so this is where I did my chiseling to make the bottom of the cavity nice and flat. Alright, take 2. These beams weigh about 180 pounds, so they're not the easiest thing to maneuver, but we were able to get it to slide right on. For the second beam, we kind of had to bench press it in place, and one of the concrete blocks was a little bit at an angle, so it took some finagling to try to get it straightened out, make another little cut on the back beam before getting it to fall into place. There we go. Second time's the charm.
Alright, so even though these aren't attached at all, there's enough weight where they don't lift up even with this much of a cantilever. Now part of that is because everything fits snug, And even if they did lift up, they'd probably rub against the wall a little bit since the fit's so tight. Now, these are structural timbers and they're not perfectly straight. So here they're level, and I got a nice little 1/4-inch gap, which I'll use for cables. But over here, you see there's about 1/2 inch dip. So I'm not going to try to shim that into place or anything. Let's just sand this edge down so at least we have a continuous surface.
The growing theme in my work is to move fast, do ideas that I think are cool, execute them as quickly as possible, and then use an angle grinder to fix the mistakes and even things out. I use my power carving disc, and it only took me a matter of seconds to make the surfaces continuous. That being said, the angle grinder isn't exactly the most refined tool, so I had to take the beam out of position, clean up the corner because I didn't want to gouge into the drywall with the angle grinder, and then sand out these rough carved marks. This project made a lot of sawdust inside, but that's where our sponsor comes in. This project left my bedroom with a bit of sawdust and some concrete dust as well, but I'm lucky. The sponsor for this video gave me a robot that helps me clean up. That's right, I got the Narwhal Flow. Now this isn't my first robot vacuum. I've tried a few over the years and they make sense. I have a long single level house with concrete floors out in the desert, so picking up dust and all the sawdust that I'm tracking in from the shop is really important. But the early ones that I tried were frankly, well, they were just too dumb. They kept getting stuck, the vacuum part didn't work that well. The Narwhal Flow, however, is quite different. And not only does it vacuum, it mops as well. It has a large, thick mop that continuously distributes hot water to break down stains. This ability is in part achieved by the fact that it has a rolling mop. It can remove tough stains in a single pass, and then it disposes of the dirty water into its docking station. It also has these extendable features to help it clean along the edges of walls and in corners. I don't have carpets, but it has a carpet-focused tech, so when carpet is detected, the brush cover automatically lowers firmly to boost suction. It has twin AI dodge obstacle avoidance, which gives it real-time detection and avoidance of over 200 plus household objects. The base for the Narwhal also works pretty hard with a 4-step self-cleaning system that washes, dries, and sanitizes your little robot. It's also really good around the edges with 99% corner cleaning. So if you want to treat your home to spotless fresh floors, check out the link in the description and let me know in the comments what you think about household robots in general. I really like that I can isolate this between vacuuming and mopping or just have it be combined and do it all automatically, but curious to hear your thoughts. Thanks to Narwhal for sponsoring this video, and let's get back to the desk. The concrete edges are nice and rustic looking, so I did round over the edges on the wood notches just so it would be a little smoother in that transition. This little jar of Rubio Monocoat cost more than all the concrete, but it's a really nice stain and it's pretty easy to use, so I felt like I was economical with this project overall, so I splurged a little and made life easy with this finish. With the beams all stained, I can do the final placement, and now I have a super long, very brutalist place to edit videos and pay bills.
So I love how sturdy this thing came out. I mean, there's nothing holding it together other than gravity, and even when I'm on the cantilever end, nothing really budges. It also doesn't really slide or wiggle at all laterally. Another thing that's cool is I can adjust the gaps in between the board. If I need to pull the concrete out a little bit more, I can. And that way I can get cords and plugs through these different cracks. So in terms of how I'll use it, I'll probably put my desktop computer on this end. That way it's not right in front of the window. I'll use the windowsill for my growing bonsai collection. And I like to keep a big stretch of open tabletop for paying bills and organizing paperwork. I don't check those things as much as I should, but when I do, I get the nice stack, open them all up, lay them all out, write checks, do the replies and all that. So I like having a lot of open, clear space. On that side, I'll probably have some little shelves and stack up my hard drives and all those sorts of things. This project is also relatively affordable. Each one of these concrete pillars was only about $45 worth of concrete, and each of these beams was only about $125. So for a 14.5-foot long desk, I think that's pretty good given how substantial everything is. Now you could of course go longer. If I was to do this as a dining table, I'd probably go 3 boards, so that way that would give me about 34 inches across. And in order to get chairs all along the side, I might taper in those concrete pillars. So that way you could have chairs that don't have to go around the pillars. They can actually go, right under them. For the stain, we used Rubio Monocoat in charcoal, and it was actually a little darker than I thought. It was more black. I thought it was going to be more of a walnut brown. That being said, I like it, and I'm not going to change it. But it always goes to show that if you have a really specific idea of what you're going for, you should probably take a little scrap piece of the same type of wood and stain that first. But this is super modern. It doesn't look too tiger striped, which is what I typically worry about when I use a black stain on something like Douglas fir or any sort of softer wood. It can just be a little bit too much, well, like Tigger the Tiger. So this came out great. Another really important thing is to let the wood sit. This type of Douglas fir is not meant for furniture use. And even though these beams were pretty straight and not too many cracks, there was a little bit of sap that leaked out. So I did let them sit for about a week before I started sanding and machining them. That is probably enough time out here in the desert, but if you're in a more humid climate, I would let them sit outside until you're absolutely sure that no more sap is going to ooze out. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out the link to learn more about my narwhal, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks.